was walking through a museum, staring at a cave painting, and something inside me shifted. It wasn't just art. It was a message from the past, carved into stone by hands long gone. The figures are crude, the colors faded, but there's a story there. Story that feels like it was whispered from the lips of someone who lived thousands of years ago. These walls, these silent witnesses, hold more than just images. They hold the first attempts at communication, the first steps toward understanding the world around us. We are not just looking at art. We are looking at the origin of language, of memory, of the human need to tell stories, to make sense of the unknown. And in that moment, I realized the first stories were not told with words. They were drawn, painted, carved, left behind for us to find, to feel, to understand. We are talking about the first time human beings looked at a wall and saw something beyond the rock. A story waiting to be told. A world waiting to be imagined. These were not just images. They were echoes of lives lived, moments preserved, and truths that had no words. Yet they carried the weight of meaning. This was the birth of storytelling. Not in books or screams, but in the dark of a cave, where silence was thick and meaning was carved into stone. It was here, in these quiet places, that the first stories were born. Not to entertain, but to explain, to survive, and to remember who they were. You think their stories are just words, but they are more than that. They are the fingerprints of your mind, pressed into the world like ancient handprints on a cave wall. Every time you tell a story, you are building something that will outlive you. You are leaving a trace, a whisper in the dark, waiting for someone else to find it and feel it. Stories are not just what we say. They are what we carry. They are the invisible thread that connects us across time, space, and silence. To care about this is to care about yourself. To care about what it means to be human, to be seen, to be remembered, and to be part of something that lasts. You are not just a reader. You are a participant in the oldest, most profound act of creation. You are the echo, and you are the origin. We stand at the edge of time, where the first stories were etched into stone. The cave walls, dark and silent, held the whispers of our ancestors, their hands tracing symbols into the darkness. The flicker of a fire, the crackle of flame, and the murmur of voices. These were the first stages of storytelling. A shared ritual, a communal act, a way to preserve the world as they knew it. As civilizations rose and fell, storytelling evolved. From oral traditions to written script, from parchment to ink, the message stayed the same: to remember, to share, to connect. Today, we tell stories in different ways. On screens, in books, in the air. But the essence remains: a human need to make sense of the world, to leave something behind. From cave walls to digital screens, storytelling has always been a bridge between generations, a way to carry the past forward into the present and into the future. Imagine sitting in a dark cave, hands on the wall, feeling the cool stone beneath your touch. You look up and see a shape. Maybe a deer, maybe a spirit, maybe something you can't name. You want to remember it, so you draw it. You don't just draw it. You tell a story. You say, this is how it began, and this is how it ends. You're not just making a picture. You're making a memory that lives forever. This is how we began. With walls, with hands, with the desire to hold on to something that might otherwise fade away. We made the world stay with us. Even now, when we speak or write, we're doing the same thing. We're telling stories so that the world doesn't disappear. We're making it stay. The first step is the setup. A quiet space, untouched by the chaos of the world outside. A cave, its entrance a narrow mouth, leading to a world of silence and darkness. The people who came here were not wandering aimlessly. They had purpose. They were searching for meaning, for something to leave behind, something to connect them to the world and to each other. They bring with them not just tools, but stories. Their hands, rough with toil, are steady as they prepare the walls. They are not just carving into stone. They are shaping the first chapters of human memory. This is not just a cave. It is a stage, a canvas, a beginning. The first act of storytelling is not the tale itself, but the quiet act of setting the scene for it. In this moment, the world outside fades. Only the cave remains, and within it, the first words are about to be written, not in ink, but in stone. The first step is to create a mark, but the second step is to give it meaning. A line on stone is not a story. It is a question waiting to be answered. To give it meaning, the hand must return. It must trace, repeat, and layer. Each mark is a note in a silent symphony, each stroke a breath in the rhythm of memory. The mechanism is simple, yet profound. Repetition and variation. A mark becomes a symbol, and a symbol becomes a language. Not spoken, but felt, as if the rock itself remembers. It is not just about what is drawn, but how it is drawn. The pressure, the angle, the pause. These are the hidden notes in the silent language of the cave. In this way, the cave wall becomes a vessel, not just for memory, but for the soul of a people. It is not a record, but a living testament to what it means to be human. The twist begins not with words, but with meaning. A figure is drawn, but it is not a mere figure. It is a story, a moment in time, a question posed to the dark. This is not just drawing. It is a pause, a breath held between the silence of the cave and the silence of the mind. The figure is not yet alive, but it is waiting to be heard. And then, in that stillness, something changes. The figure is no longer just a shape. It is a presence, a possibility, a question that lingers in the air like smoke. This is the moment when the cave becomes a stage, and the wall becomes a mirror. The twist is that the story is not told. It is found, carved into the silence, waiting for the human voice to join it. The twist is the spark that turns the cave from a place of stone into a place of memory. It is the first step in a journey that will span millennia, from wall to word, from silence to story. Beneath the surface of these ancient walls, a silent revolution was taking place. The human brain, wired for pattern, was beginning to see meaning in the marks it made, in the shapes it drew. It wasn't just about the act of drawing. It was about the mind's capacity to invent, to imagine, to reach beyond the immediate, to shape time and memory into something that could be shared. These marks were not random. They were the first language of thought, the first syntax of meaning. They were the quiet hum of something ancient, something human, something still alive in the silence of the cave. The science of it all is not in the pigment or the stone, but in the mind that created it. In the act of making a mark, humans were doing something that would echo through time, giving voice to the silent and shape to the unknown. This is where the story began, not with words, but with wonder. Not with sound, but with a hand pressing against stone, and the mind reaching for something greater than itself. We think of stories as something we write, something we tell, but they were never meant to be words alone. They were born in the silence between the lines, in the spaces where the unknown met the human. Stories are like those cave walls. They are not just the marks we leave behind, but the space we make for others to stand in. They are the echo of a voice that once echoed through the dark. So, when we speak of storytelling, we are not speaking of a skill or a craft. We are speaking of a kind of presence, a way of being that leaves a mark, even in the dark. It is not about the words, not about the story itself. It is about the moment before the story begins, the silence that holds the promise of a voice. And in that silence, in that space, something is born. Something that will outlive the cave, outlive the voice, and outlive us all. Comment this emoji if you made it to the end. History was not always written. For thousands of years, people lived without records, their stories passed down through memory, song, and oral tradition. But one day, something changed. A single idea took root. The belief that some truths should be preserved, not just remembered. These marks were not just records. They were the first attempt to freeze time, to capture the flow of human experience and turn it into something permanent. And so, with the birth of writing, history was born. Not as a story, but as a thing. Something that could be found, studied, and passed on. The written word was not just a tool, it was a revolution. A way to see the world not through the eyes of the moment, but through the eyes of the past. So what exactly are we talking about? We're not just discussing books or scrolls. We're talking about a moment in human history where people began to fix their memories in something permanent, something they could pass on. Before writing, stories were passed from one person to the next, like a flame. But they could be lost. Writing gave them a home, a place where they could live beyond the moment. It wasn't just about recording events. It was about asserting control over time itself. Writing allowed humans to step out of the chaos of oral tradition and create a shared, documented reality. This was the birth of history, not as we know it today, but as a discipline, as a way of seeing the world through the lens of the past. It's a shift that shaped the way we think about everything. You might think history is just about kings and battles, but the written word is the thread that binds us to the past. Every time you read a book, you're standing on the shoulders of ancient scribes who carved meaning into clay and stone. Without writing, we would be ghosts in our own history, lost in the silence of time. The stories we tell today are built on the fragile bones of words that survived millennia. Every word we write today is a bridge to the future. The choices we make now will shape the stories our descendants will read, and they will shape who they become. So, when you're scrolling through your phone or reading a novel, remember, you're part of a long chain of human voices trying to make sense of the world. That's why you should care. The first scribes didn't just record events. They carved time itself into clay and stone. Their words, once meaningless symbols, became the foundation of what we now call history. As writing spread, so did the idea that some things were worth remembering. Monuments rose, and with them, the weight of the past began to shape the present. From Mesopotamia to the Nile, writing became a tool of power and memory. Kings wrote their names in stone, and the people began to look back, not just forward. The written word didn't just record history. It changed how we saw ourselves. It allowed us to step outside the present and imagine the past, to live with the echoes of what had come before. And so, history was not born from a single moment, but from a steady, silent revolution of ink and thought. Every word was a step toward the future, a step we are still walking today. Imagine you're sitting by a fire, telling a story to your friends, but instead of just saying it, you draw pictures in the dirt. That's how people remembered things before they could write. One day someone says, "What if we make these pictures last forever?" So they start etching symbols on sticks and stones. That's how writing began, like a special kind of magic. Before writing, history was just what people remembered. Now, it could be written down, passed on, and never forgotten. That's how we know what happened before us. So, writing is like building a bridge between the past and the present. It lets us see what happened before we were born and tells us who we are. Before the first stroke of ink, there was the need to remember, to preserve the past, to speak across time. People had to find a way to capture the fleeting moments of human experience. This need was not born in a moment, but in the slow, persistent ache of forgetting. Stories passed down from generation to generation became fragile, vulnerable to the winds of memory. These early symbols were not yet words, but they were the first steps toward a language that could hold time. They were the foundation of something far greater than themselves. With these first marks, people began to imagine a world where the past was not just remembered, but recorded. The written word was not just a tool, it was a promise of continuity. This was the first step, the setup, a moment of quiet determination, a turning point in the long, slow unfolding of human history. Once the scribe had mastered the symbols, the next step was to create a system that could be used consistently across time and space. This meant developing a standard form for each character, so that any reader could understand what was written. This standardization allowed the symbols to become more than just marks. They became a language, a shared code that could be passed down through generations without losing its meaning. These schools became the first institutions of knowledge, where the written word was not just recorded but safeguarded, and where the seeds of history were carefully planted. With this system in place, the scribe could now commit events, laws, and ideas to writing, ensuring that the past was not lost to memory or myth, but preserved in a form that could outlive the people who created it. The written word had become a mechanism of preservation, a bridge between the present and the past, and the first step toward the creation of history itself. The next twist was the idea that writing could be more than just a record. It could be a way to shape the future. By creating texts that told stories about the past, scribes could influence how people remembered it. This meant that history wasn't just being recorded, it was being rewritten. The scribe didn't just write what happened, they wrote what should be remembered. This was the first time humans could not just remember the past, but also choose which parts of it would live on. Writing had become a kind of power, not just a means of record. This shift from oral memory to written record was more than a change in medium. It was a change in identity. The people who could write were no longer just storytellers. They were architects of memory itself. The written word is more than a tool. It's a kind of science, a way of capturing the chaos of time and making it measurable. It's how we turned the flow of events into something fixed, something we could return to, like a fossil from the past. In the same way that natural sciences rely on observation and record, early scribes were the first scientists of history, measuring moments and preserving them with ink and reed pens. Their work was precise, even if they didn't know it. The act of writing introduced a new kind of order to the world, one that allowed people to think about the past as a series of events, not just as a sequence of stories. It's like the first time we could look back and say, this happened. This science of record keeping wasn't just about preserving facts. It was about creating a shared memory, a way to build on what came before. It's the foundation of all that we now call history. In the end, the written word is a hum beneath all of human civilization. A quiet, steady pulse that lets us remember, reflect, and make sense of the past. It's the science of memory, and it's everything. History is like a river that only starts to flow when someone builds a dam. Before writing, time was a river, unmeasured, unrecorded, and free to wash away with the seasons. The dam is the written word, a barrier built not with stone, but with symbols. It slows the current, shapes the water, and ensures that what flows is preserved. In the act of writing, we are not just recording events. We are shaping memory, giving it form, and ensuring it doesn't fade like the mist in the early morning. This is the quiet revolution of the written word. Not a war or a conquest, but a shift in how we see time, how we see ourselves, and how we remember who we are. So, in the end, the written word is not just a tool. It is the first step toward being a species that remembers. And that is what makes us human. Comment this emoji if you made it to the end. You've probably never thought about it, but the way we learn, create, and share ideas has been quietly transformed by a single invention that's been around for over 500 years. This isn't just any book. It's a relic of a revolution that made knowledge no longer the privilege of the few, but the birthright of the many. It wasn't just the technology. It was the idea that ideas could be multiplied, spread, and shaped by people who had never held power before. This is the story of how a simple machine changed the course of human history, and how we're still living in its wake. So what exactly are we talking about? It's not just about the invention of printing press. It's about a shift in power, a change in how people access and control information. Before the press, knowledge was locked away, guarded by monks and elites. It was expensive, time-consuming, and limited in reach. The written word was a privilege. The printing press didn't just make books more available. It changed the way people thought. Ideas spread faster, more widely, and more freely. The world began to change. This was the birth of something bigger than a tool. It was the birth of a movement, a revolution in how knowledge was shared, and how people could shape their own reality. The print revolution was the first step toward the democratization of knowledge. It laid the foundation for the modern world we live in today. You might not notice it, but every time you pick up a book or read a newspaper, you're standing on the shoulders of a revolution that once felt impossible. The print revolution wasn't just about spreading knowledge. It was about rewriting the rules of who could create, share, and own ideas. Today's access to information feels effortless, but it was once a battle fought with ink, fire, and the courage to speak truth to power. The same forces that once threatened to silence knowledge still exist, but now they're just a little harder to spot. You should care because the right to know isn't a privilege. It's a right that was won through struggle, and it's still worth defending. The first printed book, the Gutenberg Bible, emerged in the mid-1400s. It was a marvel of engineering, a fusion of art and technology that would change how people consumed knowledge forever. In the decades that followed, printing presses spread like wildfire across Europe. No longer did knowledge belong to the few. It began to ripple through the hands of the many. The Enlightenment came next, a golden age of reason and inquiry. Printed newspapers, dictionaries, and scientific journals became the lifeblood of intellectual progress. By the 19th century, printing had become a force of mass communication. The press was no longer just a tool for the elite. It was the engine of democracy itself. From the Gutenberg Bible to the printing press of the 19th century, print revolutionized how knowledge was shared, stored, and fought for. It was not just a technology, it was a movement. Imagine you're holding a book, but it's not just any book. It's a book that someone in another country, long ago, made with their own hands. That's the print revolution. Simple as that. Before print, books were like treasure maps. Only a few people had them, and they were made by hand, one letter at a time. That's why they were so rare and expensive. This wasn't just about books. It was about ideas. People started sharing stories, science, and laws in ways that changed how we think about the world. The print revolution wasn't just about making more books. It was about giving people a voice, a way to share their thoughts, and to learn from others, no matter where they were. Before the first page was printed, the world was shaped by scribes and scholars, men and women who worked in candlelit chambers, transcribing knowledge by hand. This was the beginning of the print revolution, a quiet but transformative moment in human history. The setup began with the press itself, a heavy wooden frame with a movable type. It was both an instrument of precision and a symbol of power, requiring a steady hand and a steady mind to operate. Once the type was set, the press was ready. The operator would pour ink onto a rubber roller, then press the type against a blank sheet of paper, transferring the ink with a force that would shape the future of knowledge. The setup was not just about the press, but about the people in the process. Every word, every letter, was a step toward making knowledge accessible to all, not just to the elite who could afford to keep it locked away. This was the first step in a long journey, the setup of the print revolution. It was a moment of great seriousness, of quiet determination, and of hope for a more open and informed world. The first step was the creation of the printing press, but the second step was the creation of the ink and paper that made it usable. These materials were not always available in every region, and their development was a quiet revolution in its own right. Ink was made from natural sources: charcoal, iron gall, or even blood in some cases, while paper was crafted from plant fibers, often recycled rags or tree bark. These materials were not only essential, but also shaped the look and feel of the printed word. Paper makers and ink makers were often overlooked, but their work was just as vital as that of the printer. Without them, the revolution would have lacked the physical means to spread its message. The production of paper and ink was not uniform across regions. Some areas had abundant resources, while others struggled to create them. This uneven access further shaped the spread of printed materials. In the end, the printing revolution was not just about the machine. It was also about the materials that made it possible. These materials, though simple, were the foundation upon which knowledge was built and shared. The clever twist was not in the machine itself, but in the way it was shared. No single person held the key to its operation, yet everyone who needed it could find a way to access it. This was a radical shift in thinking. Knowledge was no longer the exclusive domain of the few. It was now a public good, something that could be multiplied without losing its value. This shift from secrecy to shared knowledge created a system where innovation was not stifled by ownership, but accelerated by the free exchange of ideas. In this way, the press became more than a machine. It became a symbol of a new kind of power, one that belonged to the people, not just the rulers. At the heart of this revolution lies the science of ink and paper, the chemistry of print that turned thought into permanence. The printing press wasn't just a machine, it was a system, a network of gears, pulleys, and human labor that transformed ideas into mass-produced text. Each print run was a scientific experiment in distribution, a test of how far a single text could travel, how many minds it could reach. The science of print was also the science of replication, a way to turn one idea into thousands, ensuring that no single person held the monopoly on knowledge. In this quiet hum of machinery, a deeper science was at work. The science of human connection, the science of how knowledge could change the world. Imagine a world where knowledge was locked behind heavy doors, only accessible to those with the key. The printing press changed that. Like a sudden burst of light in a dark room, it opened the door to everyone. Before the press, books were like rare gems, beautiful, but few could own them. Now, they were like seeds, planted in the soil of many minds, growing into forests of understanding. The printing press didn't just spread knowledge, it spread power. It gave people the tools to question, to learn, and to shape their own destiny. In the end, the printing press was more than a machine. It was an idea, a belief that knowledge belongs to all, not just to the few who could afford it. Comment this emoji if you made it to the end. I remember the way it felt to hold a book in my hands. The weight of it, the texture of the pages, the scent of old paper. There was something sacred about it, something that made me feel connected to the past. Now, I can carry thousands of books in my pocket, but it's not the same. There's a kind of loneliness to it, a quiet disconnection from the physicality of memory. What happens when the cloud forgets? When the servers crash, or the data is lost, or the company shuts down? We leave our memories in the hands of strangers. I wonder if we've traded the warmth of memory for the cold comfort of convenience. We've given up the human touch for the machine's precision. In the end, we're not just storing data. We're storing who we are. And I'm not sure if we're ready for that. We're not just talking about files and folders. We're talking about how we remember, how we hold on to the past, and how the act of remembering is now mediated by a machine. The cloud is not a place, but a system, a network of servers, a collection of algorithms, and a silent, unseen architecture that shapes how we keep and lose our memories. Our memories are no longer just in our heads, but in the code, in the circuits, in the cloud. We outsource our past to machines that don't age, don't forget, and don't care. What happens when we forget to back up? When the server goes down, or the file is deleted, or the account is closed, the past vanishes, but the machine remains. The cloud is a kind of amnesia, but it's also a kind of permanence. It holds our lives, but it doesn't know us. It stores our memories, but it never understands them. You think your memories are safe, but they're not. They're stored in the same place as your photos, your emails, your passwords. And if that place is lost, stolen, or forgotten, so are they. We outsource our minds to the cloud. But in doing so, we lose the act of remembering. We no longer need to hold details in our heads because someone else does it for us. What happens when the technology we rely on fails us? When the servers go down, or the company folds, or the data is erased? We're left with nothing but the silence of a forgotten drive. Our memories are more than just data. They're part of who we are. They shape our identity, our history, our sense of self, and yet we're leaving them in the hands of machines we don't fully trust. You might not notice it at first, but the way you remember is changing. You're less likely to recall a name, a place, a moment. You're more likely to search for it, and that's a subtle erosion of something essential. This isn't just about data. It's about identity, about truth, about the stories we tell ourselves. And if we let the cloud take over, we might lose more than we realize. We began with stone, with fire, with hands that carved memory into bone and cave. The first humans did not write. They remembered. They told stories that outlived them, passed them on through generations like heirlooms. Then came the scroll, the codex, the parchment. Fragile, fleeting, but still a vessel. We learned to store memory in ink and vellum, to hold it close, to protect it from the wind and time. Then came the computer, the microchip, the internet. Memory no longer lived in the hands of the few, but in the palms of the many. It was no longer a matter of preservation, but of proliferation. And now, we look to the sky, to the cloud, to the server farm, for the memory we once carried in our hearts. We trust the machine to hold it, to keep it safe, to let us access it whenever we need. Imagine your brain is a big, cozy house, and every memory is a toy you keep in a box. But now, you're putting all your toys in a giant, invisible box in the sky. You can find any toy whenever you want. But the house you once lived in? It's getting smaller, and you're not sure if you'll ever go back. You're not just forgetting your toys. You're forgetting how they made you feel, how they made you laugh, or how they made you cry. You remember the words, but not the smell of the room, or the sound of your parents' voices, or the way the sun felt on your face. You can keep your memories safe, but sometimes you wonder if you're really holding on to them, or just holding on to something that's not you anymore. You begin with a choice, a quiet moment of decision. You plug in your devices, a silent ritual of connection, as if the world is waiting to be remembered. The interface appears, a gateway to something vast and impersonal. You navigate through menus, each click a step into the unknown. the future of memory. You select your files, a slow and deliberate process, as if you were choosing which parts of your life will live on and which will fade into the past. The upload begins, a quiet, mechanical motion. You watch as your memories are transformed into data, each byte a piece of something you once held close. And then, it's done. The files are gone, replaced by a symbol, a promise that they are safe, but not quite yours anymore. The data is split into fragments, like pieces of a shattered mirror, each one stored in a different location across the globe, unseen, unconnected, waiting to be reassembled. Each fragment is encrypted, wrapped in layers of code like a soldier in a battlefield, protected from the eyes of those who would misuse it. When you ask for your data, the system searches for these fragments, like a detective piecing together a mystery, each clue leading to the next. Once found, the fragments are decrypted, reassembled, and returned to you, a memory restored from the silence of the cloud. But in this process, the memory is no longer yours. It is now a part of the system, a ghost in the machine, waiting to be called again. The clever twist isn't just about storing memory. It's about making it feel alive again, even when it's not. The system isn't just saving words or images, it's reconstructing experience. It uses algorithms that understand not just what was seen, but how it was felt. A smile, a tear, the weight of a moment. It all gets translated into something the system can hold. This is how it works. Not just by storing, but by sensing. Not just by saving, but by understanding. Not just by recalling, but by reimagining. The clever twist is that it doesn't just preserve memory. It transforms it. It turns the ephemeral into the eternal, the personal into the universal. There is a quiet hum beneath the surface of the digital age, a rhythm of electrons and data moving through circuits like the pulse of a forgotten heart. We no longer store memories in the mind, but in the cloud, a vast impersonal archive where time is measured not in seconds, but in bits. The cloud is not a place, but a system, a vast invisible network that holds our lives, our thoughts, our echoes of who we were. We trust it with our past, but can we trust it with our future? Or are we merely leaving behind the fragments of what once was in the name of something more permanent? The science of memory in the cloud is not just about data. It is about the quiet, unspoken question of what we are choosing to keep and what we are choosing to forget. We are not storing memories in the cloud. We are outsourcing the act of remembering. It's like handing over your diary to a stranger and hoping they'll keep it safe. The cloud is not a place, but a promise. A promise that our past will always be accessible, even as our present slips through our fingers. We no longer live in the moment. We are always looking back, always trying to capture something that was never fully there to begin with. In the end, the cloud is just a mirror, not of who we are, but of who we think we are. And it's a mirror that only shows us what we want to see. Maybe we are not losing memory, but losing the language to hold it. And in that loss, we are remembering how fragile we really are. Comment this emoji if you made it to the end.